organized around her. Her face is a lioness, clean, calm eyes, a muzzle that suggests restraint. Not the grin of a predator playing with prey. More like the stillness of a predator that doesn't need to prove anything. Her skin is a shade of sun-burnished bronze or deep umber, like the earth after heat. Not polished, not porcelain, more like living stone warmed by the daylight. Gold catches her cuffs, collar, the geometry of ancient craft. But this isn't decoration, it reads as rank. And her eyes, they are measuring instruments. They measure distance, they measure threat, they measure truth. When she turns her gaze on someone, it doesn't feel like being looked at. It feels like being judged by the wild itself. Packhead is a lion goddess tied to hunting and war, but not in the loud, marching drums way. Her war is precision. Her hunting is law. She is the goddess of the moment before impact, the silence before claws, the breath held, the twitch of muscle under skin. If Sekhmet is the blaze, Packhead is the ember that waits. If Bastet is the hearth cat, the domestic guardian, Packhead is the wildcat that never belonged in your home in the first place. Packhead moves between those polarities like a blade sliding between ribs, soft and inevitable. She is the lioness outside the city order, the divine reminder that civilization is a thin robe worn over the animal truth. She is the goddess who hunts at twilight. Packhead is strongest in the hours that don't belong to anyone, not to noon. Noon is too obvious. Not to midnight. Midnight is too deep. Packhead belongs to twilight, where the desert stops shining and starts listening. At that hour, the horizon bruises purple and burnt orange. The sand cools fast. The air changes texture, like silk turning into smoke. You can imagine her then, a silhouette near the cliff edge, a goddess shaped like a lioness, gold catching the last light like fireflies trapped in metal. Her feet silent on stone, not running, not sneaking, but existing with the confidence of a creature that has never been prey. This is the Packhead myth, the lioness who teaches the world what it feels like to be hunted by the sacred. Packhead's worship is associated with places like Ben Hassan, cliffside zones where tombs and sanctuaries cut in the rock made from the landscape to feel like a library for the dead. And that matters, because a cliff temple isn't a normal temple. A temple in a city says the gods are here with you. A temple in a cliff says the gods are here, you just happen to be allowed near them. The rock is older than your lineage. The desert doesn't care about your name. And the goddess of the cliff is the same way. She is not impressed, she's not bribed, she's not moved by performance. Approaching Packhead is like approaching the ancient truth. You don't negotiate, you align or you get corrected. Packhead's energy is quiet dominance. She is not screaming wrath, she is not chaos. She is controlled force, the kind of force that doesn't waste motion, the kind of force that doesn't argue. In mythic reading, Packhead shows up in a person's life when someone needs to stop begging and start moving with authority. Someone is surrounded by predators and has to become one. Someone is learning that softness without boundaries becomes a meal. Packhead doesn't teach to be cruel, she teaches to be real. She teaches the law of the hunt, which is not evil, it is honest. The desert doesn't apologize for being dry. The lioness doesn't apologize for eating. Packhead is that level of truth. The truth that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't care how anyone feels about it. Her name is often connected to scratching, and this is the perfect symbolism. A scratch isn't always lethal. A scratch is a message. A scratch says, I could have ended you. I chose education. Packhead's scratch is initiation. It marks a person. It can be literal, claws, blood, pain, or spiritual, ego cut, illusions torn, comfort shredded. Packhead doesn't just kill prey, she kills falsehood. And if someone is living in a lie, Packhead is not the goddess that gently guides them out of it. She is the goddess that rips away the curtain. Packhead in the lioness continuum. It had multiple lion-headed goddesses because lion energy had multiple modes. Packhead is not redundant. She is specialized. She is the lioness of the cliffs and the borderlands, hunting as sacred law, controlled violence, twilight vigilance, the wild feminine that doesn't seek approval. If Sekhmet is divine punishment, Pakhet is divine pursuit. And pursuit is scarier. Punishment ends, pursuit keeps coming. Bringer of breath, civilizer of worlds. Now the wind does not announce itself. It moves first, unseen, shaping what follows. Across the ancient lands of Mesoamerica, there existed a presence whose power was not measured by conquest, but by continuity. A force that did not rule through terror, but through order. An intelligence that shaped civilizations without demanding their submission. They call this presence Quetzalcoatl, known as the feathered serpent, a being where sky and earth converge in one, where motion is governed by restraint, where creation begins not with command, but with breath. He was not worshipped as a tyrant. He was remembered as a guide. Now, Quetzalcoatl was never a single image, nor a single role. He moved through cultures and centuries under many names, each reflecting a function rather than a disguise. As Quetzalcoatl, he was the feathered serpent, the union of earthbound life and celestial motion. Feathers representing the sky, scales representing the ground, neither being dominant, both being necessary. As Ihikatl, he was the wind itself, invisible, essential, life-giving, the breath that animates the world, clears stagnation, and carries sacred speech from one age to the next. Among the Maya, he was remembered as Kukulkan, an echo rather than imitation, proof that his influence traveled farther than borders and endured longer than empires. These were not separate gods. These were aspects of the same civilizing force. His role as the civilizer. Quetzalcoatl did not create humanity to rule it. He prepared humanity to survive. He is credited with bringing maize from the mountains where it is hidden and transforming this sustenance into civilization. He established calendars so time itself could be measured, remembered, and anticipated. He gave humanity sacred speech, language not only for command, but for teaching, for prayer, and for recording. As Ihikatl, the wind, he moved the sun across the sky so the world would not stagnate in darkness. Breath, motion, rhythm. These were his domains. Where other gods demanded sacrifice to prove loyalty, Quetzalcoatl emphasized balance. Order was not enforced, it was simply taught. The descent into Mexiclan. When the world stood empty of humanity, Quetzalcoatl descended into Mexiclan, the realm of the dead, where the remains of previous ages lay guarded by these lords of death. Now these bones were not relics, they were potentials, and the rulers of Mexiclan did not yield them willingly. They tested Quetzalcoatl with impossible trials, attempting to entrap him in his failure. And in the struggle, he stumbled, and the bones shattered. Creation itself, it seemed to have failed again. But Quetzalcoatl did not retreat. He gathered the broken remains and spilled his own divine blood upon them. From sacrifice, not dominance, humanity emerged. Imperfect, fragile, and varied. Human beings were not forged as flawless instruments. They were born of loss and intention. And this imperfection was not a flaw, it was the point. The Age of Order. In later ages, Quetzalcoatl walked among humanity as ruler priest, remembered as Tolpitzin Quetzalcoatl, presiding over the city of Tula. His rule was defined not by expansion, but by refinement. Human sacrifice was rejected, arts and learning flourished, craftsmanship, astronomy, and ritual knowledge became the foundations of society. Under this guidance, civilization advanced without descending into cruelty, and this was rare. and rarity often brings attention. Where Quetzalcoatl represented restraint and continuity, Tezcatlipoca embodied conflict, reflection, and disruption. He did not confront Quetzalcoatl with armies, he confronted him with a mirror. And in that mirror, Quetzalcoatl saw not a god, but a flawed being, aging, mortal, capable of error. Temptation followed, sacred boundaries blurred. The myth does not dwell on indulgence, it dwells on consequence. Quetzalcoatl recognized that he had fallen short of his own principles, and instead of doubling down on authority, he chose removal. Exile and transformation. Quetzalcoatl did not cling to power. He left. Some traditions say he walked eastward towards the sea. Others say he burned himself on a pyre. The details differ, but the meaning remains constant. He refused to rule dishonestly.
Record Moke. La Katrina. Mama Brigitte. 3000 BCE. Region. Akan regions of West Africa. Event. Early Akan belief systems define death as a guided transition rather than a final ending. Meaning, death is understood as movement between realms. It requires oversight and authority. Consequence. The foundation is established for Moke, later known as Amoki, as a guardian of souls. 2800 BCE. Region. Akan cultural sphere of West Africa. Event. Funerary customs emphasize judgment, order, and ritual preparation. Meaning, the dead are evaluated before entering the ancestral realm. Consequence. Moke becomes associated with moral accountability and spiritual law. 2500 BCE. Region. West Africa. Event. Death rituals incorporate symbolic barriers and thresholds. Meaning, passage into the afterlife is conditional, not automatic. Consequence. Moke's role solidifies as guardian of the boundary between life and death. 2200 BCE. Region. Akan oral tradition. Event. Stories describe a female authority presiding over the dead. Meaning, death governance is feminized and tied to balance rather than violence. Consequence. Moke is remembered as impartial, feared, and respected. 2000 BCE. Region. Akan societies of West Africa. Event. Death is framed as continued participation in community life. Meaning, ancestors remain present and influential among the living. Consequence. Moke's authority expands from gatekeeper to regulator of ancestral continuity. 1800 BCE. Region. West African belief systems. Event. Death becomes associated with protection rather than punishment. Meaning, the afterlife is seen as refuge, not exile. Consequence. Moke's image shifts from fearsome enforcer to stabilizing force. 1500 BCE. Region. Akan regions of West Africa. Event. Offerings and moral preparation become central to burial rites. Meaning, conduct in life affects status in death. Consequence. Moke becomes associated with ethical remembrance and judgment. 1000 BCE. Region. West Africa. Event. Ancestral reverence intensifies across multiple societies. Meaning, death is fully integrated into daily spiritual life. Consequence. Moke's role becomes permanent within cultural structure. 500 BCE. Region. Akan oral culture. Event. Moke's imagery stabilizes through repeated oral transmission. Meaning, death is depicted as stern, orderly, and just. Consequence. Her authority becomes unquestioned across generations. 500 BCE. Region. Mesoamerica. Event. Indigenous cultures depict death through skeletal deities. Meaning, death is visible, cyclical, and familiar. Consequence. The symbolic groundwork for La Katrina is established. 400 CE. Region. Central Mexico. Event. Death imagery becomes linked to ancestor remembrance rituals, meaning the dead are honored as continuing members of society. Consequence: death becomes culturally normalized. 1500 CE. Region: Mexico. Event: Spanish colonization introduces Catholic death iconography, meaning indigenous death traditions are suppressed but persist beneath the surface. Consequence: native symbolism adapts rather than disappears. 1600 CE. Region: Colonial Mexico. Event: indigenous and Catholic death imagery merge, meaning death becomes a hybrid cultural expression. Consequence: the skeletal female archetype begins to re-emerge. 1700 CE. Region: Mexico. Event: satirical skeletal figures critique social hierarchy, meaning death exposes equality in mortality. Consequence: the proto-La Catrina figure takes shape. 1800 CE. Region: Mexico. Event: elegant skeletal women are popularized in print art, meaning death mocks wealth, class, and vanity. Consequence: La Catrina becomes a recognizable cultural icon. 1900 CE. Region: Mexico. Event: Day of the Dead celebrations elevate La Catrina's role, meaning death is framed as remembrance rather than fear. Consequence: La Catrina becomes a national symbol. 2000 CE. Region: Global. Event: La Catrina gains international recognition, meaning Mexican death philosophy enters global culture. Consequence: death is reframed as memory and continuity. 1700 CE. Region: Haiti. Event: African spiritual traditions merge with European folklore under colonial conditions, meaning death guardianship adapts to displacement and enslavement. Consequence: Mémoire Brigitte emerges within the Gade spirits. 1800 CE. Region: Haiti. Event: Mémoire Brigitte becomes associated with cemeteries and graves, meaning she protects the dead and enforces moral order. Consequence: death becomes guarded rather than abandoned. 1900 CE. Region: Haitian Vodou tradition. Event: fire and crosses become central to Mémoire Brigitte's imagery, meaning death represents purification and protection. Consequence: she is feared by the unjust and trusted by the faithful. Late 1900 CE. Region: Western Media. Event: Vodou death figures are misrepresented as malevolent, meaning death is falsely portrayed as evil. Consequence: Mémoire Brigitte's true role is obscured. 2000 CE. Region: Haiti and diaspora communities. Event: cultural reclamation corrects misrepresentation, meaning death goddesses are reaffirmed as protectors. Consequence: Mémoire Brigitte is restored as a guardian figure. Present day. Region: Global Mythology Studies. Event: comparative analysis of death goddesses across cultures, meaning death is governed, remembered, and regulated. Consequence: Moke, La Catrina, and Mémoire Brigitte are recognized as stabilizing forces, not villains.
It struck. In the high hall of Asgard, beneath banners older than memory, Odin spoke of convergence, of cycles closing, of stories folding back into their source. He called it wisdom. Donar called it surrender. He had been raised to protect the Nine Realms, trained in warfare, forged in conflict. Every oath carved to him said the same thing. Guard them. Protect them. Do not let them fall. So when his father spoke calmly of Ragnarok as inevitability, Donar did not hear the prophecy. He heard betrayal. The argument rose like a storm. Words became accusations. accusations became fury, and in a single terrible moment, the thunder answered. One blow, not a drawn-out duel, no ritual challenge, no prophecy fulfilled. Odin fell. The hall went silent. Donar stared at what he had done and named it an accident, a tragic miscalculation, a moment of anger. But he did not step down. He stepped forward. He took the throne. He swore he would do what his father would not. He would not accept collapse. He would not allow the 9 realms to fold inward. He would make Ragnarok impossible. So he went to war, system by system, world by world. He moved like a storm across stars. Reptilian empires were broken. Ancient territories were seized. Alliances were crushed. Resistance was disciplined. He did not call it conquest. He called it prevention. The stronger he became, the safer the realms would be. That was the logic. That was the wound. Ea was never meant to be strategic. It was small, gentle, civilian. A low-gravity world of aesthetic beauty and quiet skies. Donar had chosen it as a place of rest during his early campaigns, a world untouched by militarization. He loved it, and the reptilians knew this. Driven from territories on Earth, humiliated by Azir consolidation, waiting in the shadows, did not strike Donar's fleets, they struck his heart. Their assault on Ea had no military value. They destabilized the core, collapsed the biosphere, fractured the crust, and left it wounded, but not destroyed. A message. When Donar returned, he did not find annihilation. He found a dying world, still breathing, still molten at its core, and still whispering. He could have let it go, but he did not. Ea was not just stone, it was alive. A molten core pulsed with memory. The souls of its lost population lingered in its strata. Even Odin's consciousness, fragmented and reduced, echoed within its mantle. The world spoke, and Donar listened, not to the council, but to the grief, and he refused to let it die. He ordered the crust reinforced with God-forged superstructure, the mantle hollowed and stabilized, the core chained, regulated, integrated into engines of gravity and propulsion. Urban ruins were left preserved within the inner strata. The scars were left visible. The fracture remained, but a new citadel was born. It did not gleam like a new creation. It bore scars, an irregular spheroid drifting through space, visibly artificial, visibly broken. Its gravitational fields sheared enemy fleets. Its presence collapsed vectors and disrupted command structures. It enforced compliance with terrifying precision. Yet at its center, beneath its armor and reactors, the original mantle stone remained. Carved into it was the throne of Ea. Where Donar sat there, he did not bend cosmic law. He did not write reality. He held court. And he listened to the hum. The core whispered. Sometimes it sounded like wind through fractured rock. Sometimes it sounded like mourning. Sometimes it sounded like Odin. Not condemning, but advising. Cycles cannot be crushed. Strength cannot erase change. You cannot conquer inevitability. Donar heard weakness in his words, and so he hardened. He expanded. He enforced. His soldiers began to change. The wars were not like those of old. New weapons tore through divine regeneration. Limbs were lost that never grew back. Eyes shattered and remained dark. Immortals learned what permanence meant. Scars marked the Asir. Ea marked them too. Yet Donar refused to mourn. He called it endurance. He labeled it resolve. He said it was protection. The city of Eiat drifted as a symbol, not merely a capital, not just a weapon. It was grief armored, loss mechanized, love hollowed and weaponized. A reminder that mercy, once violated, may return as permanence. Donar does not see himself as a tyrant. He sees himself as a guardian. He does not realize that in trying to prevent Ragnarok, he may be accelerating the very consolidation his father foresaw. The whispers remain, the scars remain, the citadel remains, and somewhere in that molten core, a father waits for a son to understand that protection is not the same as control. But thunder rarely listens.
Witches, a global historical and cultural timeline. Approximately 2,100 years before the Common Era. Location, Sumer. Event, early Mesopotamian incantation texts reference female sorcerers and curse rituals. Why it matters, establishes one of the earliest recorded distinctions between sanctioned temple magic and illicit harmful sorcery. Approximately 1,750 years before the Common Era. Location, Babylon. Event, Code of Hammurabi includes legal procedures for accusations of sorcery. Why it matters, harmful magic becomes legally prosecutable under state authority. Approximately 1,300 years before the Common Era. Location, Ancient Egypt. Event, magical papyri document protective spells, curse rituals, and divine invocations. Why it matters, demonstrates normalized ritual magic within religious life rather than criminal witchcraft. Approximately 1,000 years before the Common Era. Location, Ancient Israel. Event, Hebrew scriptures condemn certain forms of sorcery and necromancy. Why it matters, later translations influence medieval and early modern anti-witch legislation. Approximately 800 years before the Common Era. Location, Greece. Event, Circe appears in Homer's Odyssey. Why it matters, establishes the archetype of the transformative enchantress. Approximately 500 years before the Common Era. Location, Greece. Event, cult worship of Hecate expands in association with ghosts, crossroads, and night rituals. Why it matters, Hecate becomes permanently linked to witch symbolism in later European imagination. 1st century. Location, Roman Empire. Event, Roman writers describe witches using poison, necromancy, and curse tablets. Why it matters, witch imagery enters mainstream literary culture. 200, location, China. Event, records describe accusations against Wu practitioners accused of harmful spirit manipulation. Why it matters, demonstrates early East Asian parallels to witchcraft suspicion. 600, location, Arabian Peninsula. Event, pre-Islamic poetry references female soothsayers and practitioners of divination. Why it matters, shows widespread association between women and mystical knowledge. 906, location, West Francia. Event, Canon Episcopi written. Why it matters, official church doctrine dismisses witch flight as illusion. 1231, location, Papal States. Event, Papal Inquisition formally established. Why it matters, creates institutional framework later used in witch trials. 1324, location, Ireland. Event, trial of Alice Keitler for sorcery. Why it matters, one of the earliest documented European witchcraft trials. 1486, location, Germany. Event, publication of Malleus Maleficarum. Why it matters, codifies demonological theory and accelerates European witch